Here. We will now call our budget and first meeting to order. Mrs. Hunter, you will now have the floor to make your presentation.
Thank you, Chair Arden. Having a little bit of technical difficulties right now, so it might flicker, just so everybody knows. But this presentation is available online, and if you don't have access to online, anybody can reach out at central office and come and get a copy. So you just let me know when you're ready. Okay. So we're going to start out tonight with the 24-25 looking back on our numbers, and I don't even know if this is going to work. Okay, you just tell me now. We're good. We always like to start with looking backwards at where we came from. So 24-25, the district brought in $67,847,417 in general fund revenue. On the left of the screen, you'll see that breakdown of what makes up that revenue. And as you can see, the top contributor is the state. And the funding that makes that state amount is going to be our per pupil funding. So when you hear about the state aid payments, that's what that number is. The second largest is going to be local, and that's right about 27.8%. And that's going to be property taxes, the majority of those dollars. Federal would be the next funding source, and that's 8.4%, and majority of that's going to be in grants, federal grants. And then oil and gas made up 4.6%, and that's on the distribution tax. As Dickinson's a hub city, we have hub city schools, and Dickinson Public Schools is one of them. Next, we'll go into general fund expenditures. General fund expenditures, we spent $66,547,199 in our general fund. Out of that percentage of breakdown you can see on the left is 80.9% staff costs. That's everything in staffing, benefits, retirement, taxes, plus base wages. And then operations, that's everything else. That's 19.1%. And we always break down to kind of show those buckets of what makes up that 19.1%. And then another fact on this one is the district really worked towards getting this 80-20 split between staff and operations costs. So we're pleased that we're staying within that. Next, we always like to look back just to make sure that our revenue aligned with our expenditures. And as you can see, we did stay below our expenditures. We brought in more revenue. And so all of those percentages, I don't know if I went to the next screen. Well, we stayed in the black, which was the most important thing of what that one showed. Next, we have the ending fund balances. So we like to show where we ended on every single one of our significant funds. There we go. General fund ended in the black, so $9,397,066. Building fund, this one I want to make a note on. It ended at $68,120,500. And the reason for the large increase on that one is we sold all of those bonds in 1 year due to the impending impact that I think it was measure 4. It was a property elimination measure, and if we would not have moved forward with selling all of those bonds in 1 year, we would have possibly been stuck, if that would have passed, having a quarter of a complete project. So erring on the side of caution and only having one time to make that decision, that's what we decided to do, was sell those bonds in 1 year and secure our funding for that project. Sinking in interest, that's where we pay our debt. So the bonds, we make a payment every year twice on every single one of them, and that's where that amount goes into and is paid out of. And then food service fund, I do want to make a note on this one. So this one ended in the black, which is great. For quite a few years there, it was deficit, and the the district was offsetting the amount on that. So I do want to say Miss Muffley, she is our food service manager. Her and her team have done an amazing job at really getting us back on track on that fund. So there's a lot of labor that went into that and a lot of great minds. So we're really grateful for their work on that. Next, we look at the levy information for 24-25. As you can see, the value of 1 mil for the district was $181,657, and the district levied a total of 146.79 mils. Between all of those funds that you see on the right, that's what makes that up. And again, just like I mentioned on the last slide, the majority of that increase lived in that sinking and interest debt service, where we saw this 54.79 mill levy. And the reason why, again, we sold all of those mills, we would have liked to have the 2.5 years traditionally that we would have done to pay those and start selling them, but we were forced to do it in 1 year. General fund, possible 70 mil max, the district levied 70. Miscellaneous fund, 12 mils is the max, the district levied 12, and then building and capital projects fund, district levied 10, and the max is 10 mils. This slide, when we look back, we always like to see where do we line up on the total mill levies. So we have the largest districts as well as the surrounding districts that are on this. And as you can see, Dickinson's right in the middle for total mills levied. And then the next slide's going to bring us into 25-26. So just like we did for 24-25, we're going to estimate what that revenue is going to be on general fund. And the district's estimating to bring in $70,479,635. Again, on the left of that slide, we show the breakdown, and there really isn't a lot of change in those sources of revenue funding. You still see the state is number one. That's because we got an increase as well. You'll see that dollar amount go up on the per pupil funding this last session. Local, we're still in that 28.9%. That's property taxes. Federal's 8.6%, and that's going to be for federal grants. And then oil and gas is 3.9%. Next, we'll review the estimated expenditure for 25-26 for general fund, and we're estimating $70,477,814. And on the left of that slide, again, we look at to see, are we within that ratio that we try to stay within, and we were. And we're estimating again that we will be at 80.9% contributing towards our staff costs, and then 19.1% contributing towards our operations. Again, when we look at this slide is showing us, are we living within our means? Is our expenditures less than our revenue? And we can see that it is. One of the things that I want to point out that yes, we're in the black, but it's a very small amount in proportion to that spending. So we're really grateful that we are in the black, but there were a lot of contributors that went into this not being as high as it has been before. One of the large ones is going to be the 3% caps, and we've had significant increase with inflation on our operations for goods and services. So that's another large contributor as to why that amount is that way. And another one would be tuition. Those amounts go up and up. And then we had quite a few federal grants that were eliminated or had ended. So those costs get absorbed. So the 25-26 estimated fund balance, you'll see general fund, we're still above what we were last year, adding that 1821 to it. Building fund, this one you're going to see start to come down. And the reason why is as we work further into that bond project at the high school and the elementary security upgrade, you're going to see us pay that for that work and it's going to be less and less that will be in that fund. And then the next one's debt service. We're going to be paying the debt for that. And then food service, again, I want to give a shout out to Miss Muffley and her team. We're estimating to be adding to that fund balance slightly. Okay. Which one? Sorry. Yeah, so then this next slide, we could go to the next one, Libby. This is our 25-26 levy information. The estimated value of a mill is $200,870 for every 1 mill. And then 25-26 total mills that the district is planning on levying is 139.4. And on the right of that slide, you can see the breakdown of that. There's some, with the legislative changes with property tax caps, you're going to see the impact of that on the right when we look at what the max amount is allowed for those levies on some of them, and then what we actually are going to levy. So general fund, the max is 70, the district's gonna levy 67.27. Miscellaneous fund is 12, the district's decreasing and we're at 11.08 mils. There's tuition fund levy, that's an increase of 0.86 mils, and then building and capital projects fund, that's 10 mils, which is a max of 10. Sinking and interest, where we pay for that bonded debt, that was at 54.79 last year, and we're estimating paying 50.1 or levying 50.19 in mils this year to make up that 139.40. And then the other thing that I want to point out that's important is a few sessions ago, the legislators, they changed the language and how districts and taxing authorities levy. They did it in dollars instead of mils. So as we talk about property tax caps, the 3% is actually based off of dollars, and it's not necessarily the number of mils levied. This slide is going to really look more into detail at some of the significant changes that impact the district financially that came out of this legislative session. Obviously, that per pupil funding, it makes up 60% roughly of the district's budget, and the legislators, they gave a 2.5% increase on that per payment amount for 25-26. And then 26-27, they gave another 2.5% increase. Property tax credit was another significant piece of legislation. We had the $500 flat property tax. If you were eligible, you could apply for that. And then this coming year, you'll have the eligibility to apply for $1,650 in property tax credits. So that's significant to our taxpayers. And then the last piece of that's going to be the property tax caps. And I'm not going to go into a lot of detail because it is in that slideshow. And for the sake of time, I'll just point out there's certain levies that are eligible to be capped at 3%. And then the legislators, they've also allotted for some other levies to not be capped. And specifically, that's going to be your bonded debt, so voter-approved bonds, and then special assessments and tuition levy. This slide is really going to show the impact of that 3% looking at Dickinson specifically. So as you can see on the left, the blue labels, that's your 2024-2025 levy, and that depicts that 146.79. And then on the left, or on the right of that slide, you're going to see that 25 and 26 levy. So that's at 139.4. And as you can see, that's a decrease in the mills levied of 7.39 mills total. And I will point out, you do see that it's an increase on the right. Even though we're decreasing our levies, the overall amount is an increase from what it was in 24. And the reason why is the value of a mill, it increased based off of the assessments of property that the county or city assessor makes. As those property values increase, the value of a mill increases. And so that's really what's the driving force behind that. Once a year, it's a terrible thing to see, obviously, as a taxpayer, but it is a sign that people are investing in our community and there's growth and there's wonderful things happening. So to really break it down to what it could look like for a property tax owner, that cap, I'm going to use residential property. So at the top, you're going to see these property values. And if you go down below, you can see which one aligns where. We'll use residential. And so when we look at that first box, residential property of $100,000 in value. So when I look at that first box, it says $660.55. That's approximately what a taxpayer would have paid at that 146.79 mils in 24. When we look over at the next column next to that, you'll see that next set at $100,000 of property tax, that's $627.60 in what a property tax owner with $100,000 in value could estimate in paying. So then that very last column, that's where you truly see the impact of those property tax caps. On that $100,000 of value, a property homeowner is going to see about $32.95 less that they would owe in property tax. So the work of the legislator, this slide really depicts that it was successful. This next slide is going to be, again, looking at where do we stack up on the total mills levied among the largest school districts as well as the surrounding school districts. And as you can see, Dickinson Public Schools, we are at the bottom, or second from the last. And that's because, again, we sold all of those mills or all of those bonds in 1 year and had to levy all of that. We are going down on them, so I would say it will be interesting to see where we land next year with those decrease in mill levy. Then we always like to end. This is really hard to see, and again, all of this information is online, or you can come into the district to get a copy. But we like to end with some more detailed information and some specifics. So that first little green section says impacts to school funding. We wanted to dive a little bit deeper into that, and that's probably something that's been quite a big topic on the news and through a lot of reporting of federal funding for schools and state funding and those things kind of changing. So one of the important pieces, and normally I never, ever bring any kind of visual, but I felt like this might be the best visual to kind of explain one of the largest impacts for us. So this is a visual that shows these are just federal mandated rules for school districts. So when we talk about the cost of education and what the district faces every year, as you can see, this list just continues to grow with mandate after mandate. The problem is we're not keeping up with the funding to pay for these. And there's many more mandates that are added because, again, this is just federal, doesn't include anything state. So I felt like maybe that was the best way to show kind of that piece of where we're having to focus on and what we're doing. And a lot of our conversations are surrounding that right now. The next section is going to be bonds and taxpayer impact. So normally we talk about one bond at a time. We've never really discussed looking at the whole of debt that the district has. So this information, and I'm not going to go through every single bond, but it does show every bond under middle school that's left, and then every bond that we have under the high school that's left, and when those will expire and what's left on those amounts. The key points that I do want to pick out is, just like homeowners, the school district has a credit rating, and that's what allows us to get a better interest rate when we go and sell debt. And so because of a lot of the decisions that our board has made to be fiscally responsible, it has allowed us to secure a much lower interest rate on our bonded debt, which directly saves our taxpayers money. And then the next thing that I want to point out on this one is another thing that's really helped to save our taxpayers money and taxes is going to be Dunn County. Since 2020, they've given out grants, and Dickinson Public Schools has been the recipient of that, and it's money that is used only for buying down debt. And they've contributed to Dickinson $2.4 million, a little over that, since 2020. So that directly impacts our taxpayers to pay off that debt faster. And that's all.
Thank you, Mrs. Hunter.
Thank you.
Once again, we apologize for the technical difficulties, but you did a great job explaining each of those slides, so we appreciate that. We would now like to open up the floor for any public comment. For those who do come up, we just ask that you state your name and provide a comment regarding the budget presentation tonight. I will ask one more time if we have anyone who would like to provide a comment regarding tonight's budget presentation.
Good evening. My name is Dean Rummel. I'm a resident of Dickinson. My question to you on the budget is, I saw the 60 mils you could levy because of the 3% cap. So you're down 2.37 mils that you're being forced to go down. How does that affect your foundation aid payments? So your foundation aid payments have a 60 mil deduct on them.
Correct.
So are you paying that twice, is what I'm seeing, to the state?
So unless the legislators make a change, we would be paying that twice. But the legislators did give kind of a really temporary fix of what we call gap funding. But on top of that gap funding, the district also is absorbing about $200,000. So there's $470,000 that we don't know if that would be covered in the future without some change because of that 60 mil deduct coming right out of our property taxes or our state aid payment.
One final question. What's your total debt then? What is the, I couldn't put the numbers together fast enough, but what's the total debt of Dickinson Public Schools?
So the total debt to our public is $108,872,916.
$109 million.
Mm-hmm.
Great. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. Any other public comment? Okay, Mrs. Hunter, thank you once again. And that concludes the budget public hearing meeting.